The last radio transmission from Celeste, Nevada, crackled through the static at 11:47 p.m. on September 14, 1958, carrying 3 words that would haunt investigators for decades. They're all gone. By sunrise, 512 souls had vanished without a trace from America's most isolated desert community, leaving behind warm coffee cups, running car engines, and a mystery that defies every rational explanation. This isn't just another unsolved case, it's a complete erasure of human life that challenges everything we think we know about disappearances. The town of Celeste clung to existence in the harshest corner of the Mojave Desert, where summer temperatures routinely climbed past 120 degrees and the nearest neighbor lived 43 miles away. Founded in 1922 around a small uranium mining operation, Celeste had grown into a tight-knit community of miners, their families, and the handful of merchants who kept the town running. The main street stretched for exactly 8 blocks, lined with sun-bleached wooden buildings that seemed to wilt under the relentless desert sun. Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Holloway knew every face in Celeste. He'd grown up there, married his high school sweetheart Sarah, and planned to raise his children in the same dusty streets where he'd learned to drive. On September 13, 1958, he'd completed his usual evening patrol, noting the familiar sights: old Pete Garrison sweeping the front steps of his general store, the Thompson kids playing kick the can under the flickering streetlights, and the warm glow emanating from the windows of the Miners' Rest Diner, where locals gathered each night to swap stories and escape the desert's oppressive silence. Everything appeared perfectly normal. The uranium mine's night shift had clocked in at 6 p.m., sharp 47 men descending into the earth to continue excavating the ore that kept Celeste alive. The evening mail truck had made its delivery, dropping off letters and packages that would never be collected. At the local schoolhouse, teacher Margaret Chen had finished preparing lessons for Monday morning's classes, carefully arranging worksheets for 32 students who would never return to their desks. But as night settled over the desert like a heavy blanket, something unprecedented began to unfold. The first sign came from the mine itself. At 10:15 p.m., shift supervisor Earl Watson attempted his routine check-in with the Surface Operations Center. The radio crackled with dead air. 20 minutes later, Watson climbed the shaft to investigate, finding the operations office completely abandoned. Coffee still steamed in mugs, cigarettes smoldered in ashtrays. The massive mining equipment hummed with life, but every human being had simply stopped existing. Watson's frantic radio calls to nearby Barstow eventually reached Deputy Sheriff Raymond Clark, who was covering the night shift at the county station. Clark initially dismissed Watson's report as equipment failure or communication breakdown. Desert communities often lost contact during electrical storms. But as midnight approached, Watson's voice grew increasingly desperate. He'd searched every building, every vehicle, every possible hiding place in Celeste. The town's entire population had vanished between 10 p.m. and 10:45 p.m., leaving no signs of struggle, no evidence of departure, no clues whatsoever. What could cause an entire town to disappear in less than 45 minutes? And why would this particular night change everything investigators thought they knew about human vanishing? The uranium mine's emergency protocols required immediate contact with federal authorities whenever suspicious activity occurred. But Watson faced an impossible task. How do you report that reality itself seemed to have malfunctioned? Comment below where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. If this mystery has already grabbed your attention, hit that like button and subscribe, because what we uncover in the next section will challenge everything you think you know about this case. When Deputy Sheriff Raymond Clark's patrol car crested the final ridge overlooking Celeste at 4:37 a.m. on September 15, 1958, the headlights swept across a town frozen in time. Streetlights glowing, neon signs buzzing, but not a single human shadow moving behind the illuminated windows. The scene that greeted him defied every protocol in his 15 years of law enforcement experience. What Clark discovered in those first crucial hours would force federal investigators to rewrite their understanding of mass disappearances. The deputy's boots crunched against the desert gravel as he approached the town's main street, his flashlight beam cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The silence struck him first, not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping community, but an absolute absence of human presence that made his skin crawl. No snoring drifting from bedroom windows, no crying babies, no late-night conversations or radio broadcasts filtering through screen doors. Even the ever-present desert wind seemed to hold its breath. Clark's first stop was the Miners' Rest Diner, where owner Betty Kowalski typically served coffee and pie to insomniacs and shift workers until midnight. The door stood propped open with a wooden wedge, exactly as Betty always left it during operating hours. Inside, the scene defied explanation. 4 plates of half-eaten apple pie sat on the counter, forks suspended mid-bite in the flaky crust. Coffee still steamed in ceramic mugs, the liquid hot enough to burn Clark's fingers when he tested it. The cash register drawer hung open, revealing $53 in bills and coins, ruling out robbery as a motive. But Betty Kowalski had vanished mid-sentence. A partially written note lay beside the register. Earl called about some trouble at the pen had rolled across the paper, leaving a blue ink trail that ended abruptly at the page's edge. Block by block, Clark documented a town caught in temporal suspension. At Garrison's General Store, owner Pete Garrison had apparently been restocking shelves when the inexplicable occurred. Canned goods lay scattered across the floor, where they'd fallen from his hands. His reading glasses sat folded on the counter beside an open inventory ledger. The final entry, logged at 9:52 p.m., delivered 12 cases, Campbell's soup, payment pending. The residential areas revealed even more disturbing details. The Thompson family's front door stood wide open, revealing a living room where 3 children had been playing Monopoly on the carpet. Game pieces remained positioned mid-turn, paper money scattered, as if dropped in haste. Mrs. Thompson's knitting needles protruded from a half-finished sweater, the yarn still wound around her invisible fingers. The family's German shepherd, Rex, was nowhere to be found, the first indication that the disappearance hadn't been limited to humans. At the schoolhouse, teacher Margaret Chen's classroom told its own story. Lesson plans for Monday's geography class lay spread across her desk, marked with her characteristic red ink corrections. A thermos of chamomile tea sat cooling beside her gradebook, the final entry dated September 13th. Tommy Richards. Arithmetic quiz. 87%. But Margaret herself had dissolved into the desert air sometime between completing her work and walking to her car, which still sat in the parking lot with keys dangling from the ignition. The town's vehicles presented the most baffling evidence. 31 cars and trucks remained scattered throughout Celeste, many with engines still running, headlights cutting futile paths through the darkness. Gas tanks read full or nearly full, eliminating the possibility that residents had attempted to flee and run out of fuel. More mysteriously, several vehicles showed signs of interrupted departure. Car doors hung open, purses and wallets abandoned on seats, but no footprints led away from the vehicles in any direction. By sunrise, Clark had cataloged 512 missing persons, ranging in age from 3 months to 79 years. The count included every documented resident of Celeste, plus an unknown number of visitors who might have been passing through town. The local mine's personnel records indicated 47 workers had been underground during the night shift, but the mine shafts revealed only abandoned equipment and empty tunnels stretching into the Earth's depths. Clark's radio transmission to county headquarters at 6:15 a.m. painted an impossible picture, requesting immediate federal assistance. Entire population of Celeste missing. No signs of violence. No evidence of departure. Recommend sealing the area pending investigation. The response crackled back through static. "Raymond, repeat that transmission. Did you say missing persons?" "Negative. Dispatch. Missing population. All of them." The Federal Bureau of Investigation would arrive within hours, bringing with them equipment, expertise, and theories that had worked in previous cases. But Celeste would challenge every assumption they'd ever made about human behavior, criminal psychology, and the very nature of disappearance itself. The town's uranium mine held federal significance, making this more than a local mystery. It was now a matter of national security. What had the mine workers discovered in those final hours before the town went silent? And why would the federal response reveal connections that stretched far beyond the Nevada desert? The answers lay buried in classified files that wouldn't see daylight for decades, but the physical evidence in Celeste pointed towards something that defied conventional investigation. The black sedans of the Federal Bureau of Investigation carved dust trails across the Nevada wasteland at precisely 11:23 a.m. on September 15, 1958. Their government plates and radio antennas, announcing that Celeste had officially become a matter of national interest. Special Agent Victoria Hartwell stepped from the lead vehicle into heat that shimmered like liquid mercury, her practiced eyes already cataloging details that would fill classified reports for months to come. This wasn't just another missing persons case. The uranium connection had triggered protocols reserved for threats to American nuclear security. Agent Hartwell had built her reputation investigating cases that defied explanation, from the unexplained death of physicist Dr. James Forrestal to the mysterious disappearance of military personnel near atomic testing sites. But nothing in her 12 years with the Bureau had prepared her for the scene that unfolded in Celeste's abandoned streets. Her team of 6 agents spread through the town like ghosts investigating ghosts, their footsteps echoing in spaces that should have bustled with human activity. The federal team's first priority centered on the uranium mine itself. The facility held contracts with the Atomic Energy Commission, processing ore that would eventually fuel America's nuclear arsenal during the height of Cold War tensions. Any security breach or sabotage attempt could compromise national defense capabilities, making the miner's disappearance a potential act of espionage or enemy infiltration. Special Agent Douglas Manning, the team's mining specialist, descended into the uranium shafts at 12:45 p.m., accompanied by portable radiation detectors and emergency breathing equipment. The mine's tunnels stretched for over 3 miles beneath the desert floor, a labyrinth of passages carved from solid rock over 36 years of continuous operation. Manning's flashlight beam revealed equipment abandoned mid-operation, drilling rigs still running, conveyor belts carrying ore to nowhere, and safety lamps hanging from tunnel walls like glowing sentinels in an underground tomb. But the radiation readings told an unexpected story. Instead of the elevated levels that might indicate a catastrophic accident or enemy attack, Manning's instruments detected radiation signatures significantly lower than normal operating parameters. The uranium ore itself remained untouched in the storage chambers, ruling out theft as a motive. More puzzling, the mine's extensive ventilation system showed no traces of toxic gases, explosive residues, or any environmental hazards that might have forced an evacuation. Surface investigations revealed equally baffling evidence. Agent Sarah Chen, the team's forensic specialist, discovered that the missing residents had left behind personal items that no rational person would abandon voluntarily. Wedding rings sat on nightstands beside beds where couples had apparently been sleeping. Parents had abandoned infants' cribs still warm with body heat, leaving behind bottles, diapers, and toys that suggested interrupted feeding schedules. Most unnervingly, prescription medications for serious medical conditions, insulin for diabetics, heart pills for cardiac patients, remained in medicine cabinets while their users had vanished into the night. The town's communications equipment provided another piece of the puzzle. Celeste's single telephone exchange, operated by the Mountain States Telephone Company, showed a curious pattern in its final hours. Between 9 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. on September 13th, outgoing calls had spiked to 3 times normal volume. Local residents had apparently been trying to contact relatives in distant cities, though the specific conversations remained unknown. The last recorded call went through at 10:27 p.m., just 18 minutes before Earl Watson's discovery of the empty mine operations center. Federal investigators also uncovered evidence that contradicted Deputy Clark's initial assessment of a peaceful disappearance. While no signs of violence existed within the town itself, Agent Hartwell's team discovered disturbed earth at Celeste's northern perimeter, where something massive had apparently been dragged across the desert floor. The impression stretched for nearly 200 yards before disappearing into rocky terrain that held no tracks. Whatever had created those marks possessed weight and dimensions unlike any known vehicle or aircraft in 1958. The military connection deepened when Agent Manning's background checks revealed that 8 of Celeste's missing residents had previously worked at classified facilities throughout the American Southwest. Former employees of Los Alamos National Laboratory, Nevada Test Site, and other atomic research installations had somehow found their way to this remote uranium mining town. The odds of such concentration occurring by chance were mathematically negligible, suggesting that Celeste had been deliberately chosen as a destination by individuals with intimate knowledge of nuclear operations. By late afternoon, the investigation had attracted attention from agencies beyond the FBI. Representatives from the Atomic Energy Commission arrived in unmarked vehicles, followed by Air Force intelligence officers, whose presence indicated military interest in the case. The small desert town that had existed in isolation for 36 years suddenly crawled with federal personnel carrying classified clearances and asking questions that revealed the true scope of Celeste's importance. But the most disturbing discovery came during Agent Chen's examination of the town's medical clinic. Dr. A.D.M. Robert Mackenzie, Celeste's only physician, had apparently been treating patients for symptoms that didn't appear in any medical textbook: persistent headaches accompanied by temporary memory loss, unexplained electromagnetic sensitivity that caused pain near radio equipment, and recurring nightmares, featuring identical imagery of underground chambers and artificial lights. Mackenzie's patient files, found scattered across his office floor, documented a cluster of similar cases beginning in early September, just 2 weeks before the mass disappearance. What kind of condition could affect an entire population simultaneously? And why would its symptoms suggest exposure to something beyond conventional medical understanding? The classified reports that would emerge from this investigation remained sealed for 65 years, but the physical evidence left behind in Dr. Mackenzie's clinic pointed toward a connection between the missing residents' health problems and something they'd all encountered in those final weeks. At 7:42 p.m. on September 16, 1958, truck driver Harold Hank Morrison pulled into a roadside diner 90 miles east of Celeste, his hand still trembling from what he'd witnessed 2 nights earlier while hauling freight across the Nevada wasteland. The story he told to anyone who'd listen would become the first eyewitness account of the events surrounding Celeste's disappearance, though federal agents wouldn't locate Morrison for another 3 days. Morrison's testimony would force investigators to expand their search beyond Celeste's borders and confront the possibility that the town's fate had been visible from dozens of miles away. Morrison had been driving his 18-wheeler loaded with mining equipment from Reno to Phoenix when unusual lights in the northern sky caught his attention around 10 p.m. on September 13th. At first, he dismissed the phenomenon as heat, lightning, or military aircraft from nearby Nellis Air Force Base. But as he'd pulled over to check his load straps, the lights had intensified into something that defied natural explanation. A brilliant column of white-blue radiance, stretching from earth to sky, like a massive searchlight pointing toward the stars. Brightest damn thing I ever saw," Morrison told FBI agents when they finally tracked him down at a truck stop in Flagstaff, Arizona. "Made the full moon look like a birthday candle. Figured maybe the Air Force was testing some new rocket or something, but it lasted too long. Had to be 45 minutes of solid light before it just went out. Like somebody flipped a switch." Morrison's account prompted Agent Hartwell to dispatch teams across a 200-mile radius, searching for additional witnesses to the mysterious light phenomenon. What they discovered painted a picture of coordinated observation that suggested multiple agencies had been monitoring Celeste long before its population vanished. Ranch hand Carlos Mendoza, working the night shift at the Broken Arrow Cattle Ranch 43 miles south of Celeste, corroborated Morrison's timeline, but added disturbing details. At approximately 10:15 p.m., Mendoza had noticed his cattle becoming agitated, lowing, and pressing against fence lines, as if trying to flee from something approaching from the north. The light phenomenon had begun moments later, accompanied by a low-frequency humming that seemed to emanate from the ground itself rather than the sky. The cows knew something was wrong before that light ever showed up. Mendoza explained through a Spanish translator. "Animals always know first. My grandfather used to say they can sense when the earth is angry." That night, the earth was screaming. More witnesses emerged as federal agents expanded their canvas. Dr. Dine, Eleanor Walsh, an astronomy professor from the University of Nevada, who'd been conducting observations at a remote research station, had documented the light phenomenon using precise scientific instruments. Her measurements revealed electromagnetic readings that spiked beyond her equipment's capacity to record, suggesting energy output equivalent to a small nuclear reactor operating at maximum capacity. But Dr. Walsh's scientific training couldn't explain why her instruments had detected the light source before it became visible to the naked eye. "The electromagnetic signature appeared on my sensors at 9:57 p.m., she told investigators. But the visible light didn't manifest until 10:12 p.m. It's as if something was building up energy for 15 minutes before releasing it all at once." The federal investigation team also uncovered evidence that civilian agencies had been monitoring unusual activity around Celeste for months before the disappearance. The Federal Communications Commission had received multiple reports of radio interference affecting broadcasts throughout southern Nevada since early June. Ham radio operators, as far away as Salt Lake City, had documented strange signals originating from the Celeste area signals that didn't match any known military or commercial transmissions. Most significantly, the United States Geological Survey had detected minor seismic activity beneath Celeste beginning in August 1958. The tremors were too small to be felt by residents, but showed a pattern that puzzled geologists. Instead of random earthquake activity, the seismic readings suggested rhythmic vibrations occurring at precise 12-hour intervals, as if something underground was operating on a mechanical schedule. Agent Manning's investigation of the geological data revealed an even more disturbing pattern. The underground vibrations had intensified steadily throughout early September, reaching peak intensity on September 12th, just one day before the mass disappearance. The final seismic reading from automated instruments showed a massive spike at 10:23 p.m. on September 13th, followed by complete geological silence that continued to the present day. The convergence of witness testimony, scientific data, and electromagnetic evidence painted a picture of an event that had been building toward September 13th for months. But federal investigators faced a troubling realization. If multiple agencies and civilian observers had been tracking unusual activity around Celeste, why had no one warned the town's residents about potential danger? The answer lay buried in classified military files that revealed a connection between Celeste's uranium mine and experimental programs that pushed the boundaries of 1950s technology. Project Blue Sky, a joint operation between the Atomic Energy Commission and the Department of Defense, had been conducting tests at remote locations throughout the American Southwest since 1955. The project's stated purpose involved studying the effects of radioactive materials on human consciousness and perception, but its true scope remained hidden behind layers of classification that wouldn't be penetrated for decades. Celeste had been designated as an observation site for Project Blue Sky since March 1958, with residents unknowingly participating in experiments designed to test the limits of human adaptation to modified environmental conditions. The town's isolation, small population, and uranium mining operation had made it an ideal laboratory for studying how prolonged exposure to specific frequencies of electromagnetic radiation might affect cognitive function and behavioral patterns. What Project Blue Sky's scientists hadn't anticipated was that their experimental protocols might interact with something already present beneath Celeste's desert floor, something that had been waiting in the uranium-rich geology for the right combination of energy and human activity to awaken from a dormancy that stretched back through geological ages. How long had this presence been sleeping beneath the town, and what had Project Blue Sky's experiments done to disturb its ancient slumber? The classified files would eventually reveal that Celeste's disappearance wasn't an isolated incident, but the culmination of a pattern that stretched across multiple test sites where similar experiments had triggered unexplained phenomena. The locked filing cabinet in Dr. Eleanor Vance's abandoned laboratory at the Nevada test site yielded its secrets at 3:15 p.m. on September 21, 1958, when FBI codebreakers finally cracked the combination that revealed Project Blue Sky's true scope. Inside lay documents that connected Celeste's disappearance to a network of similar incidents spanning 7 states and reaching back nearly a decade, each event marked by the same impossible erasure of human life. This wasn't Celeste's story alone. It was the latest chapter in a pattern of vanishings that challenged the very foundations of government science policy. Dr. Vance had served as Project Blue Sky's chief psychologist, tasked with monitoring the psychological effects of prolonged electromagnetic exposure on isolated populations. Her meticulously kept records revealed that Celeste represented the 18th test site in a program designed to explore the intersection of nuclear physics and human consciousness. Previous locations included remote mining camps in Montana, isolated farming communities in Utah, and forgotten railroad towns throughout the Southwest. Agent Hartwell's team discovered that 12 of the previous 17 test sites had experienced population anomalies, ranging from mass psychological episodes to complete evacuations under mysterious circumstances. But none had vanished as completely as Celeste, making it both Project Blue Sky's greatest failure and its most significant data point. The documents revealed that Dr. Vance had been growing increasingly concerned about the project's direction in the months leading up to Celeste's disappearance. Her final report, dated September 10, 1958, contained warnings that federal administrators had apparently ignored. Electromagnetic resonance at Test Site 18 has exceeded all previous parameters. Geological surveys indicate unusual mineral compositions in the subsurface layers that may amplify our transmission frequencies beyond safe limits. Recommend immediate suspension of operations pending further study. But Project Blue Sky's military overseers had different priorities. The classified correspondence revealed that the program operated under direct orders from the Pentagon, with funding streams that traced back to the highest levels of the Eisenhower administration. The goal wasn't simply to study electromagnetic effects on human behavior. It was to develop techniques for controlling population centers through precisely calibrated radio frequency bombardment. The Cold War context made Project Blue Sky's objectives chillingly clear. If the Soviet Union could be made to abandon strategic locations through targeted electromagnetic manipulation, American forces could secure territory without conventional warfare. Remote testing sites like Celeste served as proving grounds for technologies that might one day be deployed against enemy populations, using the science of consciousness manipulation as a weapon of unprecedented power. Agent Manning's technical analysis of the project's equipment revealed the sophisticated nature of the experiments. Hidden transmission arrays had been installed throughout Celeste's surrounding desert, creating a grid of electromagnetic emitters capable of generating specific frequency patterns that could penetrate deep underground. The arrays operated automatically, controlled by atomic clocks that ensured precise timing of energy pulses designed to interact with the human nervous system at the cellular level. But the transmission arrays had done more than affect human consciousness. Dr. Vance's geological surveys, cross-referenced with mining records from Celeste uranium operations, revealed that the town sat directly above a vast underground chamber carved from solid granite millions of years ago. The chamber contained mineral deposits unlike anything in known geological literature, crystalline formations that exhibited piezoelectric properties, converting mechanical pressure into electrical energy, and vice versa. When Project Blue Sky's electromagnetic transmissions had reached critical intensity on September 13th, they had apparently triggered a resonance effect within the underground crystal formations. The resulting energy release had created a feedback loop that amplified the original signal by thousands of times, generating the massive light phenomenon witnessed by truck driver Morrison and other observers across the region. The classified files also revealed that Celeste residents hadn't disappeared quietly. Radio intercepts from monitoring stations throughout Nevada had detected fragmentary transmissions in the final minutes before the town went silent. The communications were garbled and incomplete, but federal analysts had managed to reconstruct portions of what appeared to be coordinated evacuation attempts. At 10:19 p.m. on September 13th, someone in Celeste had transmitted, "This is emergency broadcast. All families proceed to designated rally points. Do not attempt to leave by road. Repeat, roads are compromised." The transmission had cut off abruptly, followed by electromagnetic interference that prevented further communications. More disturbing were the reports from residents of surrounding areas who claimed to have encountered Celeste refugees in the days following the disappearance. Gas station attendant Billy Fletcher in Beatty, Nevada, told investigators that a family matching the description of the missing Rodriguez clan had stopped for fuel on September 15th, paying with cash and refusing to answer questions about their origin. They looked scared, Fletcher recalled. Kids wouldn't stop crying, and the parents kept looking over their shoulders like something was chasing them. Similar sightings occurred in Arizona, Utah, and California, suggesting that some residents had successfully escaped Celeste before the final catastrophe. But when federal agents attempted to verify these accounts, they found no concrete evidence, no hotel registrations, no medical records, no official documentation that anyone from Celeste had sought assistance in neighboring states. The most compelling testimony came from Maria Santos, a traveling nurse who claimed to have treated injured refugees from Celeste at a makeshift medical station near the California border. Santos described treating people for symptoms that defied medical explanation: severe electromagnetic burns, despite no exposure to electrical equipment, temporary blindness that resolved within hours, and memory loss, affecting only specific time periods, while leaving other memories intact. They remembered their names, their families, their whole lives, Santos told Agent Chen during a recorded interview. But they couldn't remember anything that happened in Celeste after September 1st, like someone had erased 2 weeks of their lives with surgical precision. Santos's medical notes, if authentic, suggested that some force had attempted to preserve Celeste's residents by selectively removing memories that might reveal the truth about their final weeks in the town. But who possessed the technology to perform such precise neural modification, and why would they want to hide the events leading up to the disappearance? The answer lay in the deepest levels of Project Blue Sky's classification, where even federal investigators with top-secret clearances found themselves blocked by access restrictions that stretched beyond traditional government authority. What entity had sufficient power to classify information beyond the reach of the FBI itself? And how did their involvement connect to the ancient geological formations beneath Celeste's abandoned streets? The trail of evidence was pointing toward revelations that would shake the very foundations of American science policy, but pursuing those answers would require penetrating security barriers designed to protect secrets that some believed should never see daylight. The emergency meeting in Conference Room Delta at Los Alamos National Laboratory convened at 6:47 a.m. on September 24, 1958, bringing together officials whose security clearances exceeded those of most cabinet members. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across faces that had seen America's deepest secrets, but nothing in their collective experience had prepared them for the implications of what had occurred beneath the Nevada desert. The Celeste incident had exposed an intelligence network that operated beyond traditional government oversight, answering to authorities that existed in the spaces between official agencies. Dr. Harrison Blackwood, Director of Advanced Research Projects, placed a thick manila folder on the polished conference table as representatives from the Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and Atomic Energy Commission settled into their chairs. The folder's contents would reshape America's understanding of what lay beneath its own soil, but accessing that information required clearance levels that didn't officially exist. "Gentlemen," Blackwood began, his voice carrying the weight of revelations that could topple administrations. Project Blue Sky was never about controlling enemy populations. It was about making contact with something that's been waiting beneath our feet for longer than human civilization has existed. The classified briefing revealed that American geologists had been discovering anomalous underground structures since the Manhattan Project's early surveys of potential uranium mining sites. Deep core samples from locations across the Southwest had yielded materials that exhibited properties unknown to terrestrial science. Metallic alloys that conducted electricity in impossible patterns, crystalline formations that seemed to respond to human proximity, and chambers carved with mathematical precision that defied natural geological processes. Dr. Margaret Foster, the project's chief archaeologist, had spent 3 years cataloging underground discoveries that painted a picture of ancient intelligence operating on a continental scale. Her surveys revealed a network of interconnected chambers stretching from Nevada to New Mexico, linked by passages that followed geometric patterns too precise to be natural. Carbon dating of organic materials found within the chambers yielded impossible results. Some samples appeared to be millions of years old, while others seemed to exist outside conventional temporal measurements entirely. But the most disturbing discovery had emerged from deep excavations beneath Test Site 19 in Utah, where drilling operations had broken through into a vast underground space that shouldn't have existed according to geological surveys. The chamber contained artifacts that challenged every assumption about Earth's prehistoric development. Metallic structures that exhibited signs of advanced engineering, inscribed panels covered with symbols that resembled no known human language, and what appeared to be technological devices that had remained dormant for epochs beyond human comprehension. Agent Hartwell's security clearance had been upgraded to allow her access to the Utah excavation reports, which revealed that the underground artifacts weren't simply ancient, they were active. When research teams had introduced electromagnetic energy into the chamber, the dormant technology had begun responding with energy signatures that matched the patterns detected beneath Celeste just before the disappearance. The connection became undeniably clear when Dr. Foster's team discovered that the underground network possessed acoustic properties that allowed communication across vast distances. Sound waves introduced at the Utah site had been detected by sensitive equipment positioned near other excavation locations, suggesting that the entire southwestern United States sat above a vast resonance chamber that could carry signals between distant points. Project Blue Sky's electromagnetic experiments had inadvertently been sending signals into this ancient communication network, and something had been listening. The classified testimony of Dr. Robert Chen, a physicist who had been monitoring the underground responses, revealed the true scope of what had awakened beneath America's deserts. The electromagnetic signatures we detected weren't random, Chen explained to the Los Alamos Committee. They followed mathematical progressions that suggested deliberate communication attempts. Something was trying to establish contact, using our own transmission frequencies as a baseline for developing a common language. But Chen's analysis had revealed a more disturbing possibility. The underground intelligence wasn't trying to communicate with Project Blue Sky scientists. The signal patterns suggested it was attempting to establish contact with the human populations living above the underground chambers, using Project Blue Sky's electromagnetic arrays as amplifiers to reach individual human consciousness directly. The residents of Celeste had been the first successful test subjects in this cosmic communication experiment. Dr. Vance's psychological profiles from the town's final weeks documented progressive changes in behavior patterns that suggested external influence. Residents reporting shared dreams featuring underground spaces, collective experiences of temporal displacement, where hours passed unnoticed, and growing awareness of a presence that seemed to observe them from beneath the earth. Most significantly, Celeste's children had begun exhibiting abilities that defied scientific explanation. Teacher Margaret Chen's final reports documented students who could predict earthquakes hours before seismic instruments detected them, children who spoke in synchronized voices during classroom discussions, and artistic projects that depicted underground chambers none of them had ever seen. The underground intelligence had been preparing Celeste's population for something far more complex than simple disappearance. Analysis of the town's final radio transmissions revealed that residents hadn't vanished against their will. They had been invited to join something that offered transcendence beyond human understanding. But the invitation had come with a price that Project Blue Sky's administrators hadn't anticipated. The electromagnetic resonance required to establish communication with the underground network had created dimensional instabilities that threatened to spread beyond Celeste's borders. Seismic monitoring stations throughout Nevada had detected reality distortions that suggested the boundaries between space and time were becoming increasingly fluid around locations where contact had been established. The Los Alamos Committee faced an impossible decision: reveal the truth about humanity's first contact with non-human intelligence and risk global panic, or implement a cover-up that would bury evidence of the most significant discovery in human history. The choice would determine not only the fate of Celeste's investigation, but the future direction of American science policy for decades to come. What had the underground intelligence offered to Celeste residents that made them willingly abandon everything they had known? And how many other communities across America sat unknowingly above similar contact points? The final classified reports would reveal that Celeste wasn't the first successful contact. It was simply the first that had left behind enough evidence to piece together the truth about what was stirring beneath the American Southwest. The seismic readings from Station Charlie 7 spiked beyond measurable limits at 2:33 a.m. on September 26, 1958, as something massive began moving beneath the Nevada desert floor, creating tremors that registered on instruments as far away as Denver and Phoenix. Dr. Patricia Woolsey, monitoring the overnight shift at the United States Geological Survey, watched in disbelief as her equipment detected what appeared to be controlled geological activity emanating from the exact coordinates where Celeste had once existed. The underground intelligence wasn't finished with the surface world. It was preparing to reveal itself in ways that would make concealment impossible. Dr. Woolsey's emergency calls triggered a cascade of federal responses that brought military helicopters racing across the desert darkness toward Celeste's abandoned coordinates. What the surveillance teams discovered from the air defied every assumption about the finality of the town's disappearance. The entire area was glowing with the same white-blue radiance that witnesses had reported 2 weeks earlier. But this time, the light emanated from beneath the ground, rather than projecting toward the sky. Aerial photography revealed that the Earth above Celeste's former location had begun forming geometric patterns visible from aircraft, massive symbols carved into the desert floor with mathematical precision that suggested intelligence, operating on a scale beyond human comprehension. The patterns stretched for nearly 2 miles in each direction, creating a mandala of interconnected shapes that seemed to pulse with their own internal rhythm. But the most significant discovery came when thermal imaging detected human heat signatures moving within the underground spaces beneath the glowing patterns. The residents of Celeste weren't dead. They were actively participating in something that was transforming them in ways that challenged the very definition of human existence. Major Douglas Sterling, commanding the military response team, authorized the deployment of deep-penetrating radar systems that revealed the true scope of what had been constructed beneath the Nevada desert. The underground chambers had expanded dramatically since Celeste's disappearance, growing from natural caverns into vast architectural spaces that exhibited engineering capabilities far beyond 1950s technology. The radar signatures showed structures that defied conventional physics, chambers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, corridors that folded back upon themselves in impossible geometries, and central spaces that appeared to be larger on the inside than their external boundaries could accommodate. Within these impossible spaces, human figures moved in coordinated patterns that suggested they were engaged in activities that served purposes beyond terrestrial understanding. Dr. Foster's archaeological team, equipped with experimental communication devices, attempted to establish contact with Celeste's missing residents through electromagnetic transmissions directed into the underground complex. The response came not through radio equipment, but through direct mental impression, experienced simultaneously by every member of the research team. A flood of images depicting Celeste residents thriving in underground cities that stretched beneath multiple states. Their consciousness expanded beyond individual identity into collective intelligence that maintained connection to their human origins while transcending physical limitations. The transmitted images revealed that the residents hadn't been abducted or destroyed. They had been invited to participate in humanity's next evolutionary step. The underground intelligence had been monitoring human development for millennia, waiting for the species to develop sufficient technological sophistication to recognize the invitation when it was extended. Project Blue Sky's electromagnetic experiments had provided the necessary resonance to establish communication, but the choice to accept the transformation had been made freely by individuals who understood the implications of their decision. Sarah Thompson, the missing mother whose children had been playing Monopoly when the town vanished, appeared in the transmitted images as a figure of radiant intelligence whose consciousness could perceive reality across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Her thoughts, somehow accessible to the research team, conveyed concepts that challenged human language, experiences of time as a navigable dimension, awareness of cosmic patterns that connected Earth to intelligent life throughout the galaxy, and participation in projects that would benefit human civilization for generations to come. But the transformation came with prices that Project Blue Sky's architects hadn't anticipated. The expanded consciousness required abandoning individual ego in favor of collective awareness, making return to surface life psychologically impossible for those who had accepted the underground invitation. The residents of Celeste had become something more than human, but they were no longer recognizable as the people they had once been. The federal response team faced an unprecedented crisis as the underground activity intensified throughout the final days of September. Seismic monitors detected similar awakening patterns beneath 17 other locations across the American Southwest, suggesting that Celeste's transformation had triggered a coordinated response from the entire underground network. Each new activation site corresponded to communities that had been designated as Project Blue Sky observation points, indicating that the intelligence had been planning this continental-scale contact event for years. Most alarmingly, the research teams detected changes in the electromagnetic environment that suggested the dimensional boundaries, stabilized by eons of geological processes, were becoming increasingly fluid. Reality itself was beginning to respond to the underground intelligence's presence, creating zones where physical laws operated according to principles that defied terrestrial science. Aircraft flying over the affected areas reported navigation equipment failures, temporal displacement where flights arrived at their destinations before their scheduled departure times, and visual phenomena that suggested space was folding in ways that made distant locations instantly accessible. The situation escalated beyond government control when civilians throughout Nevada and Arizona began reporting shared dreams featuring the same underground cities depicted in the research team's contact experiences. Children in schools, hundreds of miles from Celeste, started drawing identical pictures of crystalline chambers and figures of light, while adults experienced spontaneous awareness of geological formations that lay buried beneath their own communities. The underground intelligence wasn't limiting its invitation to isolated desert towns. It was extending the offer of transformation to anyone whose consciousness could perceive the expanding dimensional doorways that were opening beneath population centers throughout the region. How could the federal government contain a phenomenon that operated beyond the boundaries of physical space? And what would happen when the expanding zones of reality distortion reached major population centers? The final phase of humanity's first contact was beginning, and the choices made in the next 72 hours would determine whether the species would transcend its current limitations or retreat into willful ignorance of its cosmic potential. The emergency session of the National Security Council convened in the White House Situation Room at 4:17 a.m. on October 1, 1958, as President Dwight Eisenhower faced the most classified briefing of his administration. A choice between revealing humanity's first contact with non-human intelligence or implementing a cover-up that would bury the truth beneath layers of disinformation that might never be penetrated. The decision made in that room would determine the course of human development for generations to come. This wasn't just about Celeste anymore. It was about whether humanity was ready to acknowledge its place in a universe far stranger than anyone had imagined. The briefing materials laid before the president painted a picture of reality that challenged every assumption about Earth's isolation in the cosmos. The underground intelligence had been dormant beneath the North American continent for millions of years, waiting for human technological development to reach sufficient sophistication to recognize the invitation being extended. Project Blue Sky had inadvertently provided the electromagnetic key that unlocked communication protocols established long before human civilization existed. But the intelligence hadn't acted alone. Classified reports from monitoring stations worldwide revealed that similar awakening events had occurred simultaneously on every continent, suggesting coordinated activation of a global network that had been observing human development since the species first developed language. The disappearance of isolated communities in Siberia, the Australian outback, and the Amazon rainforest followed patterns identical to Celeste's transformation, indicating that Earth itself was being prepared for integration into something far larger than terrestrial existence. Dr. Blackwood's final report to the National Security Council revealed the scope of what humanity was being offered: participation in a galactic civilization that spanned thousands of worlds, access to technologies that could solve every terrestrial problem, from disease to energy scarcity, and evolution beyond the biological limitations that confined human consciousness to individual identity. But acceptance required abandoning the illusion of human supremacy and acknowledging that Earth had always been a protected nursery world Guided by intelligences that viewed humanity as a developing species requiring careful cultivation, the underground network had been established millions of years ago as part of a cosmic education program designed to nurture emerging civilizations until they developed sufficient wisdom to join the galactic community without destroying themselves or others. Humanity had reached the threshold where continued isolation would become counterproductive, making contact inevitable, whether governments cooperated or not. President Eisenhower faced an impossible choice as reports continued flooding in from the 17 activation sites across the American Southwest. The dimensional distortions were expanding rapidly, creating zones where normal physics no longer applied, and where ordinary citizens were beginning to experience direct contact with the underground intelligence. Children throughout the affected regions had started speaking in languages that linguistic experts couldn't identify, while adults reported visits from family members who had died years earlier, delivering messages about transformation opportunities that defied rational explanation. The military response had proven completely ineffective against phenomena that operated beyond conventional understanding of space and time. Air Force squadrons dispatched to contain the expanding anomalies had encountered time dilation effects that aged pilots decades during flights that lasted minutes, according to ground-based observers. Artillery bombardments of the activation sites had simply passed through the dimensional distortions without affecting the underground structures, while nuclear weapons tests had been postponed indefinitely when scientists realized that atomic explosions might interact unpredictably with the reality-altering fields. But the most compelling argument for secrecy came from analysis of global social conditions in 1958. The Cold War had created a world balanced on the edge of nuclear annihilation, where revelation of non-human intelligence could trigger panic responses that might destroy civilization before humanity could benefit from cosmic contact. Religious institutions faced theological crises that could shatter fundamental belief systems, while economic structures built on scarcity and competition would collapse when confronted with technologies that made material limitations obsolete. The decision reached in that classified White House meeting would remain buried in presidential archives for 65 years, but its effects became visible almost immediately. Media reports of strange phenomena in Nevada were systematically suppressed or explained as military testing exercises. Witnesses to the underground contact events found themselves transferred to distant locations or reassigned to positions where their testimony would carry no credibility. The residents of communities near activation sites received medical treatment for hallucinations and mass hysteria that conveniently erased their memories of dimensional anomalies and direct contact experiences. Dr. Foster's archaeological team was disbanded, and its members sworn to lifetime secrecy under threat of treason charges. The underground chambers discovered throughout the Southwest were sealed with concrete and designated as classified military installations that would remain off-limits to civilian investigation indefinitely. Project Blue Sky was officially terminated, and its records transferred to storage facilities that didn't appear on any government organizational charts. But the underground intelligence hadn't been defeated. It had simply chosen to respect humanity's decision to delay cosmic integration until the species demonstrated greater readiness for transcendence. The activation sites went dormant, the dimensional distortions stabilized, and the reality-altering phenomena gradually faded until they existed only in classified reports that few people would ever be authorized to read. The fate of Celeste's missing residents remained unknown to surface dwellers, though deep monitoring equipment continued detecting organized activity in the underground chambers for decades after the official investigation ended. Whether the transformed townspeople retained any connection to their human origins or had evolved into something entirely beyond terrestrial understanding became a question that would haunt the few officials who knew the truth about what lay beneath America's desert floors. The town of Celeste was officially redesignated as a nuclear testing site and removed from all civilian maps, its existence erased from public records, with efficiency that demonstrated how thoroughly governments could rewrite reality when necessary. Families seeking information about missing relatives were told that no such town had ever existed, while researchers attempting to verify historical accounts found themselves blocked by classification levels that extended beyond normal governmental authority. 65 years later, Celeste's coordinates remain hidden beneath layers of disinformation designed to prevent accidental discovery of what might still be waiting in the underground chambers. But the invitation extended to humanity in 1958 was never withdrawn. It was simply postponed until the species develops sufficient wisdom to accept transcendence without destroying itself in the process. The underground intelligence continues its patient observation, waiting for humanity to demonstrate readiness for the next phase of cosmic evolution. And in isolated communities throughout the world, sensitive individuals still report strange dreams featuring crystalline cities and figures of light, suggesting that the doorway to transcendence remains open for those who possess the courage to step through it. We're only scratching the surface. The next case is even stranger. Subscribe before it drops.